In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this candle. So we are back in our course materials.blend file where we're saving all our assets. And for this video, we want to start by doing a very simple model. I'll go to the layout tab and let's just hide the ecosphere in the outliner. And let's add in a new mesh. We're going to add in, first of all, a cube, because what we want to do is we want to have our candle sitting on a surface. We'll look through the camera, and I think the height of that is a little bit high, so I'm going to use G and Z and drop that down a little bit. And we can tell from our axes here that Y is pointing directly at the camera, so we can use G and Y and just move that a little bit closer to the camera. Now let's just add a nice little smooth edge on that by going to our modifiers and adding a bevel modifier. So I'll give that a few segments. And let's just decrease this amount a little bit. And then we just have a nice smooth curve at the edges. And let's also shade this auto smooth. And that just keeps the top planes flat and the edges nice and smooth. And let's just add a material to that very quickly. So we'll go into our procedural shading tab. I'm going to select the material from the drop down, and I'm just going to grab this material that I've been working on for one of the later videos in this course. So I quite like the look of that. Let's go back to layout and do some more modelling. So our 3D cursor is right here at the moment. Let's move that up to the centre of this cube. So I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to click right click, and that moves our 3D cursor. But you can see it's appeared on our object at the same angle as we were looking at it. So we want to open up this panel on the right hand side. Go to View, 3D Cursor. I'm going to change this rotation all to 0 by clicking and dragging through them and then type in 0. We'll go to our camera view again with the number pad 0. Close this tab to give us a little bit more space to work. Let's use Shift A to add a mesh. We'll add in a cylinder. Now our cylinder has come in pretty big. We could change the radius and things just here instead of going into edit mode. So let's take that down a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. And we could even move it up on the Z axis a little bit. I think that's actually a little bit too tall. So let's change that depth down slightly. Let's make it quite squat. We can hold Shift so we get a little bit more control when we're using sliders. We'll take that to about there. That's okay, and the number of vertices is fine too. So if we rotate around, click on our object, we'll go to edit mode, and we want to do a little bit of quick editing. So there's a few mainstay tools, I would say, when we do modelling that I quite like to use fairly often. The first one is Inset, so I'm going to select this top face. What Inset does, and we use the hotkey I, is it grabs a face and it allows you to scale it while keeping the original edges in place. That allows you to create more geometry that you can move around. So inset that a little bit. We'll use E to extrude. Again, this creates a new face and it allows you to move it as opposed to scaling it. And it moves it by default along the normals. Put that to about there. Let's scale it down just a little bit using S. Inset again. And we'll go to about here. We're going to extrude again. And this time I'm just going to scale in a little bit. And we'll maybe move that down a little bit with G and Z. Now I want to create a little wick. So I'm going to inset again. We'll extrude this up. Take that to there. Now that's very straight, so maybe I don't want to do it that way. Let's undo that. Let's go into our front view and we'll go into X-ray mode so we can see what's happening. So this button takes us into X-ray mode, which gives you a little bit of a wireframe on our object. We have a tool shelf on the left hand side here, which generally I don't use very often unless I need to pick a variation of one of the common modelling tools. So you can tell if any of these icons have an alternate variation of the tool by the little triangle in the bottom right hand side of the icon. And to access those, you just click and hold on the icon and you'll get a little drop down box that will have a few more options for you. One of the variations of extrude is extrude to cursor. And this is very cool. What it allows you to do is we have this face here selected, and now we can click and we can just extrude to where we click. Because we're in the front view, we know it's going to be planar to the camera, but now we can create this nice little curve, and it's probably the quickest way that we can create that kind of shape. So let's look around here. We have a nice little wick. Let's go into proportional editing. So if you don't know what this is, this allows you to move, scale, rotate an object and affect some of the surrounding geometry as well. Now by default, the value on this tends to start at 1 meter, which is a pretty big default. So if I scale this down, you can see the whole candle pretty much scales, apart from maybe the very bottom. If we roll our mouse wheel, and we'll move that forward, you'll see on the top left-hand corner, proportional size is decreasing. Once it gets to a certain point, you can see that we actually see the circle of influence. And what I want to do is just decrease that so that our wick is changing size all the way down to the bottom. And that's about right, I would say. And generally at the end of these wicks, we have a kind of bump on the top. So again, let's extrude this just a little bit. I'm going to scale this up, but I need to change my proportional editing settings. Let's take that so it's like a kind of cup shape. We'll extrude that again, turn off proportional editing, and just scale that down so we have this interesting shape at the top. Now I'm not going to worry too much about the modelling because this is more about the materials I'm going to add to this. Let's turn off X-ray mode so we can see our object. Now at the moment this candle is pretty basic. It's almost like it's just been lit. We don't have any wax dripping down the sides. That's something that you could do if you're confident with sculpting or subdivision surfaces. You could certainly add that kind of detail. I'm just going to go pretty basic with this. I'm going to grab a few of these faces, just a few random ones here and there. I'll go to proportional editing again, and I'm just going to move these down a little bit just to create a little bit of an interesting result on the top. Next, I want to shade this smooth, and we get a kind of strange effect here because we don't have any auto smooth turned on, but we don't have to worry about that because what we're going to do is we are going to add a modifier. And I'll show you a common issue that might come up when you start adding modifiers. So I want to smooth this out, so I'll go to a subdivision surface, and immediately you can see that we start tearing the bottom of our candle. We get an interesting result at the top, maybe not quite what we're looking for, but really this subdivision isn't working. One way to fix this is by applying a bevel modifier. So I'm going to turn off subdivision in the viewport, add another modifier, add a bevel modifier, and we'll go to our overlays at the top right here, and we'll turn on wireframe so we can see what is happening with this bevel modifier. So with the bevel modifier off, we have our original geometry. We'll turn this on. We're going to create one more segment, and we are going to change the profile up to 1. So you can see with our profile up to 1, we look at our object side on. We are getting a sharp edge on our corners. If we increase our amount, you can see essentially what we're getting. Well, in this case, we're not getting much because we have clamp overlap turned on. So this is a setting that prevents this kind of thing from happening. Let's turn that amount all the way down. Zoom back in and we'll see what's happening. So pay a lot of attention to just this edge here. Just zoom in a little bit more. Incidentally, if you're trying to zoom in and it gets to the point where it just won't zoom it any further, generally hitting period on the number pad will kind of recenter the object and give you the ability to zoom in even further. Let's change that amount. You can see the way this is working. We are essentially adding in some edge loops to our object. Now, I do want some quite wide edge loops here, but on angles like this, I don't want as much. So we can use this limit method by angle, and we can just increase that until these ones here snap away. Now, the clamp overlap setting what this is doing is, at the moment you can see our wick has this strange artifact happening here because it's overlapping. We click on clamp overlap, we'll get rid of that, but we only get this amount of smoothing or this amount of bevel on our object, and I think that's actually going to be fine. So what will happen now if we turn off our wireframe? If we turn on our subdivision surface again, our mesh is going to get all torn up. It's still not working the way we want, and the reason for that is the subdivision is being applied before the bevel modifier. So all we need to do is grab this subdivision modifier using this little handle on the right hand side and drag it below the bevel modifier, and immediately that's going to fix it. So I think for the moment this is going to work out okay for us. I don't really want to spend a massive amount of time modeling this. Let's just get on to the materials. One thing we do need is we need a flame. There's a number of different ways you can do this. You could do it with an image texture. You could do it procedurally, you could do it with a model, you could do it with a fire particle system. There's a lot of different ways you could go about it. I'm just going to simply use Shift A, add a mesh, add a UV sphere, go into edit mode and scale this down because it is absolutely massive in the scene. G and Z to move it up, we'll move it into place. This is going to be very stylized. It's not going to be at all accurate. Essentially because we're making geometry into flames, which in real life, flames aren't really geometry, it's just a load of gas. We'll select this top vert. We will go into, let's try sharp mode. At G and Z and move this up, and you can see that our proportional editing lets us take just the top of this shape up and leave the rest. Let's take it to there. So again, very stylized, very cartoony. Let's just move this a little bit into place so it's just taking over the top of the wick. Move that around, just make sure it's kind of centered. We're going to shade this smooth, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to put an emission shader on this object, which essentially takes away any surface detail. We'll go into our procedural shading. We will make sure that we are in cycles, which we are. So let's start with our flame. So we're going to add a new material. We're going to call this flame. And this is a setting that we've not used yet. We're going to use the emission setting. So I'm going to choose a base color. I just want something kind of yellowish. We'll drag and drop that base color also into emission. And we'll take this emission strength and we'll take this up to about 50 for the moment to see what happens. So you can see that becomes very bright. Now we have some other lights in the scene, so let's just go to the outliner and turn those off very quickly. And we'll also go to the drop down next to our render mode, and because we're using the background image, the default background image, we can change the strength just from here. Let's take that strength down, to about 0.5 or so. So now all the light, or most of the light in the scene, is coming from this flame object, which is on our candle object. Okay, challenge time. So your challenge for this video is to create your own candle model. Feel free to make it as simple or as complex as you like. If you have any experience doing sculpting, you could always try and sculpt in some dripping wax, or you could just make it simple like the candle that I created. Add a flame and create an emissive material to light up your scene. Now once you've done that, join me in the next video, where we're going to continue working on this very simple scene by creating a wax material using subsurface scattering. I'll see you in the next video.